Okay, hello everyone. Salam, namaste, adab, and welcome to today's event. Today we have three very distinguished speakers who are going to talk on revisiting traditions, mythology, society, and womanhood in India. The speakers are Dr. Basudhara Roy from Karim College, English Department, Karim City College from Jamshedpur, Professor Sanjukta DasGupta she's a former head Department of English and former Dean, Faculty of Arts, Calcutta University, Professor Smita Agarwal, who is also a professor of English from Allahabad University. All three are poets, and I believe all three believe in women's emancipation and what you popularly call feminism. So let's hear them. The format is a little different today. I give the podium to Dr. Basudhara Roy. She is the one who is basically the anchor for today, and she will coordinate among them, all the three speakers who will talk, how they will talk. So over to Dr. Basudhara Roy.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yes, Razi Saab, thank you very much. And we are immensely grateful to the Indian Diaspora Washington, D.C. Metro Group for hosting us, for having this particular panel here today, and for encouraging us to speak on a subject that all of us find very, very close to our hearts, that is revisiting traditions, mythology, society, and womanhood in India. I'm accompanied by two fabulous feminist writers and speakers whom I would like to briefly introduce. Sanjukta DasGupta is former professor and head, Department of English, and former dean, Faculty of Arts, Calcutta University. She's a poet, writer, critic, and translator. She's a member of the General Council of the Sahitya Akademi, New Delhi, and the president of the Intercultural Poetry and Performance Library, Kolkata. She has 27 published books to her credit, which includes 9 collections of poems, several of which, like Lakshmi Unbound, Sita's Sisters, Indomitable Draupadi, and her latest, Eklavya Speaks, focus exclusively on themes of gender and mythology. Her recent awards include the IWSFF Women Achievers Award 2019 and the WEI Kamala Das Poetry Award 2020. Our accompanying speaker is Smita Agarwal, a prominent Indian poet writing in English. She's a trained classical singer and very active culturally. She has been publishing poetry in India and abroad since the last 50 years. She's the author of 3 collections of poems, Wish-Granting Words, Muffassal Notebook, and Speak Woman. Also the editor of Marginalized, Indian Poetry in English. Until recently, she was a professor of English at the University of Allahabad and former director of the Center for Women's Studies, as well as the warden of the girls' hostel at the same university. She was honored by the Award for Excellence by the University of Allahabad and the Golden Book Award for Speak Woman Speak in 2024. Sanjukta DasGupta and Smita Agarwal, welcome to this session once again, and thank you for agreeing to speak on this wonderful panel, which I feel, on this wonderful subject, which I feel you exemplify in whatever you speak and write. The subject for today is, as we have already seen, it's mythology. And in general, myths are understood to be stories that are regarded as sacred and integral to human existence. As psychologists and anthropologists have emphasized, myths are the most cherished narratives of a culture, reflecting its fundamental feelings and constituting repositories of its social values and aspirations. They are abstractions reflecting the so-called truths of a culture. They are looked upon as cultural narratives that embody its most cherished human ideals. However, There is always a question when we talk about mythology. Who created these myths? Whose culture do they uphold? What exactly do they try to promote in society? Because myths have got several facets that escape our everyday analysis. Myths, for example, transform historical time into primordial time. They encourage the idea of the enactment of rituals by placing events outside of real time. And then, by perpetuating rituals, they emphasize their timeless validity. We know that a culture deeply invests in a mythology, and myths in turn reflects its culture. So the question that we hope to critically engage with on this panel is, what is the mythological investment in culture, and how does culture invest in mythology? How and by whom are these myths scripted? Whose version of culture do they propagate? Whose socio-political values do they uphold? Given the existence of power hierarchies within any particular culture, it cannot be denied that the perpetuation of myths becomes essentially the business and privilege of the dominant group, which orders, selects, remembers, perpetuates, and most importantly, forgets material to create and construct its own stories. To talk about the understanding and the connections between mythology, society, and womanhood in India, which has forever been buttressed as well as oppressed by a very elaborate mythological machinery, I would like to invite first Sanjukta DasGupta to offer her views on the subject. Over to you, Sanjukta, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. Good evening from Kolkata, once upon a time Calcutta, India. And thank you, Indian Diaspora, Washington, D.C. Metro Group, and Razi Saab for this wonderful opportunity, enabling me to connect with all the friends who have joined this platform from various parts of the home and the world. As a rooted cosmopolitan, I believe strongly in the Maha-Upanishadic concept of the world being one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakum. Thank you, Basudhara, for bringing Smita, you and me together. And I am very familiar with your excellent curating skills, and already you have had a sample of that, the way in which she introduced the topic, which is absolutely a perfect blend of scholarship and emotional understanding. Now, this theme of today's evening, revisiting traditions, mythology, society, and womanhood in India, is truly intriguing, especially in 21st century, when in contemporary India, we are experiencing a resurgence of interest in rereading and interrogating traditional mythic texts, epics, fables, folklores, and religious narratives. I would like to cite Devdutt Patnaik, who is known as the 21st century mythologist of India, about his understanding of myth in contemporary times. And he is known to have stated that the myth is essentially a cultural construct, a common understanding of the world that binds individuals and communities together. This understanding may be religious or secular. Ideas such as rebirth, heaven and hell, angels and demons, fate and free will, sin, and even Satan and salvation are religious myths. Ideas such as sovereignty, nation state, human rights, women's rights, animal rights, and gay rights are secular myths. He familiarizes us with the idea of myth and mithya, which he sort of emphasizes as a level of the permanent truth in terms of the Sanskritic interpretation of the world. I will not go into all that. What I would want to emphasize that if myth is an idea, mythology is the vehicle of that idea. Mythology constitutes stories, symbols, and rituals that make a myth tangible. Stories, symbols, and rituals are essentially languages. Languages that are heard, seen, and performed. Together, they construct the truths of a culture. Are we straddling two polarities is the question that has intrigued me and worried me for a long time, which has resulted in the books of poems where I showcase not merely mythic tales, but try to even read through them in a process of deconstruction. Now, are we really straddling two polarities is the question that really troubles me. The traditional conception of the stereotypical myths of the Indian women, from the representation of powerful goddesses such as Durga, Kali, Lakshmi, Saraswati, and others, and from the representation of epical and mythical women such as Sita, Draupadi, Gandhari, Kunti, Ahalya, Kaikeyi, and others, to what we find in the 20th and 21st century representation of women in the print media, television advertisements, commercial feature films, web series, video games, and other digital distractions. In almost 90% of these representations, it is women as the struggling second sex that is showcased even now. Exceptions do not prove the rule. Gender, caste, and economic class entrap women in a triple bind. But we need to underscore that through the centuries of recorded history, women, whether they have been imagined as goddesses or mythic protagonists, or whether women have been at the receiving end of female feticide, infanticide, dowry deaths, domestic violence, what emerges, however, is an enduring truth, and that is women can be destroyed, but not defeated. So even in the first quarter of the 20th century, women in both urban and rural sectors, advantaged and disadvantaged women, are proving that they can resist, that they are resilient and invincible. Needless to say, the perpetrator of gender discrimination is the patriarchal capitalist system entrenched within religion and the politics of religion. Men and women and all non-binaries are equally victims and sufferers under these relentless forces of hetero-masculinist power structures. So I question that where are the empowered women in literary texts? Weeping women and warrior men have been iconized in epics, myths, classics in all cultures, global and local. In the 21st century, are we still stuck with women's ill-being and lack of agency rather than felicitating women's well-being, where women are represented in literary texts as active agents of social change and can claim gender equality? More than books, somehow the focus now seems to be more on the visual media. So commercial films, avant-garde films, and web series on the OTT platforms have been more open and progressive in representing working women, working class women, professional women than we find in print literature. Though in the last 20 years, the millennial writers, both men and women writers, are breaking free from gender stereotyping and objectification of women, commodification of women, and those social evils that are often elided in literature. Dowry deaths, female infanticide, feticide, sexual assault, acid attacks, body shaming in public places, and more importantly, domestic violence, which are mostly unreported, rape, murder, suicide, denial of education, healthcare, exploitation of women as unpaid domestic labor, reproductive labor, and the narcotic maxim of the labor of love. For the administration, however, women are beneficiaries. A large percentage of working women are working in unorganized sectors. And we get to know that they just love cooking gas cylinders. Now, the feminist poems that are akin to poems on myths written by Indian women, which is really the focus topic on which all three of us will focus today, I somehow, through my limited understanding, find that the poets who write in the vernacular languages are more uninhibited and more confident about writing, about claiming gender equality. Rather, this peculiarity lies in the fact that in 21st century, I have noticed that Anglophone women poets choose a more placatory approach of conciliation and appeasement and remain enigmatic and elusive, not eager to rock the establishment, unlike previous poets of the mid-20th century like Kamala Das, Eunice D'Souza, and the others, and a few others. Among the Bengali poets with whom I am familiar, I know some of them personally too. There are Mallika Sengupta, Krishna Bose, Taslima Nasreen, Mandakranta Sen, and also a quite significant number of women poets from Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh and Kerala who write in that uninhibited style of asking those tough questions. And if in the 21st century we cannot ask those tough questions, then we will have to wait for another 1,000 years, which is, of course, an understatement if we think in terms of women's gender inequality and women's liberation. That is my limited understanding of the subject.
Thank you so much, Sanjukta. No, it's a very, very wide understanding. And I perfectly agree with the point that you make about vernacular writers. And this was something which I happened to be discussing also, an idea that the vernacular version of, the Indian version of feminism seems to be more apparent in vernacular literature. And the kind of rage and resistance that they bring to the discourse is something that perhaps the English language or the kind of pressures under which the colonial system under which the language has been imbibed somehow prohibits us from expressing ourselves in the uninhibited way, which you have just pointed out. Because I happen to be reading certain Gujarati poets in translation, Gujarati women poets, and I was totally surprised by the kind of ideas that they brought into poetry. So thank you very much for those very rich and diverse ideas on the subject of Indian womanhood. I would now like to ask Smita ma'am to talk about the subject, to express her views of the connections between mythology, society, and womanhood in India. Over to you, Smita Agarwal.
Thank you, Basudhara, and many thanks to Indian Diaspora, Washington, D.C. Metro Group, to Razi Sahab, to Basudhara, and to all of you for being here and for inviting me to put my views across to you. After Sanjukta's very expansive and very intense analysis, I don't know what more I will be able to add to it. Nevertheless, let me try. So first and foremost, I don't know who chose the topic, but it's a very, very interesting topic for me to have, focused on and to have brought my mind's attention on this. And as soon as we think of womanhood in India, we necessarily have to factor in intersectionality. Because womanhood in India, as was pointed out just now, womanhood in India is, a woman in India is doubly, if not triply disadvantaged, because first of all, she is woman, then she will be belonging to a certain caste, then she will be belonging to a certain religion, and she will also be belonging to a certain class. So all these factors of a woman being a woman, and caste and religion and class, all these factors come into play when you have to reason out the position of a woman in India. Now, what is womanhood in India? I mean, who invented this concept? And is it a monolithical category that this is womanhood in India and everybody just fits into it? We have to ask ourselves this question, that is it a monolithic category into which all women living in the Indian subcontinent will be fitted into and analyzed within that structure or within that framework? Can we at all in India have a singular kind of an Indian womanhood, given our geographical, cultural, and religious variations? We can't. We can't have one kind of an imagination when we imagine womanhood in India. A woman living in Assam, what womanhood would mean to her is going to be distinctively from the kind of middle class, Brahmanical womanhood in India that I grew up in. So to me, it seems as if womanhood in India is a vast ocean with types and types of life forms, all living underwater, but each entity and each life form being unique, being spectacular. Having understood that, it becomes clear, it becomes amply clear that regional cultural traditions create varied shades of womanhood in India. So that's one way that we have to look at womanhood in India, through the lens of intersectionality. Then the second aspect that I would like to focus my attention on is, why does literature use tradition as a myth? And when we think on this, we realize that it is not just India or the subcontinent or Asia. All over the world, even in the Western traditions, Greek, Latin, this, that, we all know that tradition is an inexhaustible, it seems as if it's an inexhaustible mine of literary ideas. And writers across the world, across centuries, across time frames, writers feel the need to use tradition as a launching pad, to use tradition as a sounding board. They feel the imperative to interrogate tradition. So, why do writers feel this need? Why do they feel this imperative across cultures, across time frames? One way of looking at it, according to me, and I may not be right, I'm just putting forward what came into my mind. One way of looking at it is to refer to the Anglo-American poet T.S. Eliot's theory of tradition and individual talent, which he published in 1990. Within the framework of this theory, Eliot said that a serious writer is never born in a vacuum. A serious writer emerges out of a tradition, and while evolving as a writer, that writer tinkers with tradition, interrogates tradition in order to burnish, in order to make their own individual talent shine. Hence, according to Eliot, the poet's individuality lies not so much in their departure from tradition as in those aspects where the work of their predecessors, where the work of their ancestors assert themselves most vigorously. To put it plainly, T.S. Eliot underscored a knowledge of history. He underscored a knowledge of history. He underscored a good knowledge of tradition as one of the most important requisites for becoming an evolved writer, thus giving intertextuality, or the echoes and the resonances of our predecessors and our ancestors that we have in our writing, thus giving intertextuality a place of prominence in literary practice. So if we have to examine womanhood in India, if we have to look at how literary texts produced by women or any other writer within India, how they use tradition, how they use mythology, how they mirror aspects of society in their writing, I think these two critical concepts of intersectionality and intertextuality are going to play a prominent role in the examination of this topic. Now, let me proceed by giving you a few examples. If there is time, Basudhara, is there time?
Please,
okay.
Of course,
Yeah.
yes.
So if you could just screen share that Mujhe Ravan Jaisa Bhai Chahiye, the Hindi poem. So I will proceed now by giving you an example of how Indian writers have revisited and reimagined tradition through mythology, and how they have been mirroring society, and in that process they have given their version of womanhood in India. As Sanjukta Di said, she has already preempted me in her talk when she said that she feels, and rightly so, she feels that it is in the regional languages, in the vernacular languages, in the languages other than Indian English, where the main force of feminist assertion lies. So I will just read this poem very fast, and I hope most of you understand Hindi. And while I read this poem, you will understand how this poet, Sudha Shukla from Lucknow, who has written this poem in 1998, how brilliantly she dismantles patriarchy and caste in this very short poem. The poem is the story of a pregnant mother, pregnant for the second time, asking her older daughter, what do you want? Do you want a brother or a sister? And the daughter says that I want a brother, but I want a brother like Ravan. And obviously the parents are shocked and they say, what the hell are you talking about? What nonsense are you saying? And then the girl reasons out. She says, I want a brother like Ravan, because look at Ravan. For the sake of Supernakha, he gave up his kingdom. He lost his kingdom, but he stood by his sister like a good brother. And even though he was the most powerful king, he did not touch Sita. He did not violate her without her consent. And look at Ram. What did he do? There comes Sita back after such a long, prolonged war, and he makes her walk through fire and he abandons her. And the poem ends so beautifully with the lines saying that both the mother and the father are in a state of shock because the daughter has dismantled patriarchal thinking and also caste thinking. So the poem goes, Ravan jaisa bhai. दोबारा गर्भवती हुई मां ने अपनी बेटी से पूछा, तुझे क्या चाहिए, बहन या भाई? बेटी ने जवाब दिया, भाई. किसके जैसा? पिता ने लड़ियाया. शाहरुख या सलमान? रावण जैसा, बेटी बोली. क्या बकती है, पिता ने धमकाया. मां ने घूरा, गाली देती है. क्यों मां, क्या गलत किया था? रावण के बहन के अपमान पर राज, प्राण, वंश और सिंहासन लुटाने वाला, शत्रु पत्नी को हरा कर भी स्पर्श न करने वाला, रावण जैसा भाई ही तो चाहिए हर लड़की को आज. 14 बरस के वनवास और अग्नि परीक्षा के बाद परछाई सी साथ देने वाली गर्भवती पत्नी को त्यागने वाला मर्यादा पुरुषोत्तम सा भाई लेकर क्या करूंगी मैं? सारे जीवन दुख के अतप और लांछन से कातर बहू की आहें तुम कब तक सुनोगी? हे माँ, तुम कब तक राम को जन्मोगी? हे माँ, तुम कब तक राम को जन्मोगी? हे माँ, तुम कब तक राम को जन्मोगी? अब माँ सिसक रही थी और पिता आवाज था. पिता आवाज था. So we see that if we look at Ravan in the traditional way as being dark, as being rakshas, as being violent, as being evil, then we can look at him from the aspect of caste, and the daughter in her choice and the poet in her words, Sudha Shukla, the poet in her words, both challenge and redefine the concept of maryada, the concept of dignity, honor, which is so important in the mainstream Hindu tradition. My second example, should I go on, Vasudhara? Hello? Should I go on, Vasudhara? Hello? Hello?
Gee, go on. She's somehow muted, so she's
So
pointing you to go on.
my second, because I needed her to, screen share that. Anyway, if she's not there, my second example
Yes,
is
which one would you like me to screen share?
Pankhu.
Sure.
Pankhu. So my second example is Pankhu, a Garhwali play. You see, I just now told Razi Sahab that I belong to Uttarakhand. I belong to Garhwal. So this is a Garhwali play which was written by Satya Saran Raturi in Garhwali in 1932. And it was performed in Tihri Garhwal in 1936. Now, 100 years ago, the human rights record for women in Uttarakhand was abysmal, and it continues to be abysmal even today because the terrain is so difficult. Hardly any infrastructural development has taken place in the interior regions of Garhwal and Kumaon, the interior regions of Uttarakhand. There is hardly any potable water. There are no roads. There's hardly any electricity. So you see, the condition of women was very poor when Pankhu was written. And in writing that play, the writer exposed the weaknesses and the drawbacks of society when looking at a woman and when dealing with a woman's life. So in Garhwal and in Jaunsar Babar, even now this practice continues because there is a gender imbalance and there are less girls compared to men. So a woman may be married off, like Draupadi, she may be married off to 5 men. This practice of marrying girls off very young and marrying off girls to more than one man still continues to exist in Jaunsar Babar, and it is these malpractices of marrying girls very young that that is interrogated and castigated in this Garhwali play Pankhu. Now, Pankhu is not only married off at a very young age, but in fact, she is sold off to a man 20 years older than herself for a mere 1,100 rupees by her greedy, selfish father. One of the high points of this play is the dialogue in Garhwali, where the father of Pankhu, Balkhu, the father of Pankhu, is negotiating the sale price just as he was selling off a buffalo in a cattle fair. Now, this play in 1932 and 36 tore into the malpractice of the sale of child brides. And the publication history of this play shows that it is still very popular because it went through several imprints. It was reprinted in 1955, it was reprinted in 1962, in 1980, and the last print run in 1995. In the last print run, all the copies sold off like hot samosas. And this information I have acquired, and it has been provided to me by the Garhwali journalist Shri Manoj Istwal. So the popularity of
Have we lost you, Smita ma'am? Smita ma'am? All right, I think Smita ma'am will join us very shortly.
I think internet problem. I think it is an internet problem. Yeah, she's back.
Yes, she's back.
No.
Oh, no, she
was...
probably got disconnected. Yeah. All right, I'll stop the screen sharing here in any case. So while Smita ma'am joins us, I think she has given us some very interesting ideas to ponder on.
She's already
yes,
there.
She's back.
Already...
Smita ma'am, you are muted. You will have to unmute and please continue. Yes. Oh.
Basudhara, do I have time for the third example?
Quickly, if you can.
Yeah. So this Bhojpuri song is about a young girl who's got married, and she's brought this Hire Jadaudar Kangana from her home as Stridhan, and her Choti Nanad, her husband's younger sister, who is as yet unmarried, she likes the Kangana, and she starts pestering the bhabhi that you give me this diamond bracelet, you give me. And the bhabhi in the song refuses to part with her bracelet because she says that this is my Stridhan. So first the father-in-law tells her that, oh, what is it? Give your bracelet to your sister-in-law. Then the husband pressurizes her. the mother-in-law pressurizes her, but the bride says, no, I will not part with this bracelet that I have bought from my marital home, from my home. And finally, in the end of the song, in the last verse of the song, buckling and yet not buckling under pressure, she flings the ornament in an act of defiance. And in the song, she says, Kangna utar maine angna mein pheka. And in this way, the song, being a traditional space, creates a space for self-expression, creates a space for rebellion, creates a space for saying no to something that the woman doesn't want to do. Now, this is a folk song in Bhojpuri. It cannot be ascribed to a single author. It is an accretion of ideas over time. Yet, in a patriarchal stranglehold, we have numerous examples of songs women sing during marriage, during festivals, during birth, Sohar songs in birth, and various other ceremonies, where the song text defies strict social conventions. So these are my 3 examples from languages other than English, where I feel the literary texts have been incisive enough, investigative enough to interrogate patriarchal conventions and to challenge and rebel against patriarchal conventions. Having said that, I will now hand the mic over to Basudhara.
That was a wonderful, wonderful journey, because when Sanjukta DasGupta she spoke about, citing Devdutt Patnaik, she spoke about how myths or mythology cannot just be confined to religious myths or to what we traditionally ascribe as legends or folklores. They are rampant in our society in various forms. And Sanjukta DasGupta spoke to us about the various cultural representations of women on various fora today. And I think by pointing out, by attempting a kind of temporal journey back into the very recent past, Smita Agarwal was able to bring out ways in which women's lives have largely remained unchanged, and also the necessity to create these intertextual spaces. Thank you for bringing in T.S. Eliot. I think all 3 of us, apart from our interest in feminism, share our love for Eliot. So thank you for bringing in tradition and individual talent and for giving it a feminist focus here. So all these views have only reminded me of Rola Bath, who in one of his essays reads mythology from the perspective of semiology, from the post-structural semiological perspective. And he says that myths are politically opaque because stories are naturalized in myths. Therefore, the political potential of myths is often unnoted. And he says that it is because of this political opacity that it is extremely difficult to vanquish myth from the inside. So the only way, in his opinion, that one can defeat myths would be to craft new myths out of the existing ones and to thereby rewrite the original signification of myths. So from mythology, we are entering into a phase of remythification. And if one looks out and looks about at the various cultural products that are circulating, we are all looking at various formats of remythification. So I'll just quote Barth. He says that, truth to tell, the best weapon against myth is perhaps to mythify it in its turn and to produce an artificial myth. And this reconstituted myth will in fact be a new mythology. Since myth robs language of something, why not rob myth? All that is needed is to use it as the departure point for a third semiological chain, to take its signification as the first term of a second myth. And I believe that this practice of remythification is something that I see in the rich poetry of Sanjukta DasGupta and Smita Agarwal. Sanjukta DasGupta, for instance, has a book that is called Lakshmi Unbound. She has another book that I want to bring in today is Sita's Sisters. In Lakshmi Unbound, Sanjukta DasGupta takes Lakshmi, the goddess which is popular perhaps throughout India, but in the Bengali culture, Lakshmi has a significant place in the idea that the idea of Lokhi is also associated, with the with morality. So the idea of the Lokhi me or the Lokhi chele, it amounts to a kind of goodness, purity. And these are very, very innocuous terms that carry a great deal of cultural baggage. Sanjukta DasGupta has liberated Lokhi. She has made Lakshmi unbound so that Lakshmi does not need to sit at a particular place or to respond to a particular set of qualities that are supposed to embody womanhood. So without wasting more time, I would invite Sanjukta DasGupta to talk a little about her practices of remythification and to maybe read either a poem or a couple of, sections from her poetry. Over to you, Sanjukta, ma'am.
Thank you, Basudhara. How much time do we have? My watch is showing just 5 minutes.
We could maybe have 7 minutes each, you and Smita, ma'am. So we would be able to wrap up by around 9:35.
All right. So I just want to introduce my own poetry. I'm not going to talk about vernacular poetry because I write in English, but I try to write in a way probably which is not the more well-known, restrained, very aesthetic poetry that we find in Indian English women poets writing. My first gendered myth-based book of poems was Lakshmi Unbound, which was published in 2017, followed by Sita's Sisters, and then Indomitable Draupadi. In 2023, I felt using intersectionality, as Smita referred to many times, would be a more holistic reading of cognition and affect relating to the hegemony of caste and class hierarchy, the politics of vertical and horizontal levels. My poems are feminist, revisionist texts, and I could well claim that I tried to provide a counter-hegemonic discourse by challenging the social conditioning and deep-rootedness of religious myths that I feel needed de-stereotyping, a concerted courage of convictions to break free from the stranglehold of ancient patriarchal belief systems wherein women are represented as docile subjects, caregivers, and service providers to domestic demands. I try to prioritize and problematize demythologization and secularization of myths, which is the creating of new myths that Basudhara pointed out. And that is precisely what the 21st century should try to do. Create new myths and not to carry the baggage of the myths of the past into a new century. In all cases, it is almost breaking free from the patriarchal prisons and singing the songs of freedom. Feminist poems are all songs of freedom. So in the 21st century, let women in all societies step towards the freedom promised by the metaverse by becoming active agents of social change. In fact, the poems that I write, I feel are freedom songs and not just a feeble voicing of pained disbelief and a passive protest. Instead, these poems try to construct a liberated environment from creative thought, creative expression, and a fearless mind. That is precisely what I learned from Virginia Woolf and Simone de Beauvoir. And that is precisely what I have tried to express in my own poetry as far as possible, because I notice that Virginia Woolf gave us that one-liner about how to access creative freedom. And she said that uninhibitedly, if you are able to kill the concept of the angel in the house, that is the domestic goddess Lakshmi, only then liberation of women will be possible. This is liberation of creative women. Virginia Woolf draws a line between the ordinary women and creative women. Now, as the time is really short, I will not read entire poems because my poems, I don't know how, somehow are pretty long. But again, before I read my poem, I should also acknowledge that Rabindranath Tagore has been my liberator. And I'll just read a few lines from his poem Mukti, which is freedom, which I have translated, and which is also the preamble of the epigraph of my poem Lakshmi Unbound. I will only read very brief sections of that poem. Now, but what Tagore wrote in early 1918 is about the torture his own daughter had been subjected to in her marital home. And he writes, "With downcast eyes and veiled head, I have spent 22 years in your house. That's why both at home and without, everyone says I'm Lakshmi, Sati, an extremely good woman." See the irony of it all. And elsewhere, Rabindranath had said, they call prisons sasural, marital homes. So this is the poem. Don't call me Lakshmi. I can't ever be Lakshmi. I want to fly kites. I want to climb trees. I want to read and write. I want to sing and dance. I want to climb mountains. I want to swim in the seas. I want to do what I like, whenever I like. I want to be mad, I want to be bad, I can't be in corners of four-walled spaces. I can't be in eddies, I want to flow in the mainstream, I want to be in whirlpools. I want to roam and run, I want to eat fruits from trees. I want to drink to the last drop the juice of grapes. I want to cook for myself. I want to dream, I want to pace the rainbow arch in a spectacular hallucination. I can't be Lakshmi. I will never fail this endurance test. I have to speak, I have to cry, I have to scream, I have to laugh. I will forever fail this endurance test. I have flung off the sellotape on my lips. I will sing the freedom song. I may not be Lakshmi, but I am. I just can't be Lakshmi. I can't be Lakshmi. I can't be good, sane, silent Lakshmi. I can't be the angel in someone's house. I don't want to be a disembodied spirit. I don't want to be Lakshmi. I am a Lakshmi. Trap me, if you can. So I had to leave out a short section from this poem. And the second one that I have selected for this evening's reading is thankfully a shorter poem, and it's called Millennial Sita. I was thinking about young people with whom I work very, very actively in a poetry association, and I keep on wondering what probably they want to write, but haven't yet been able to voice what they feel. I would like to feel that this is what a millennial Sita born after the 1990s and say barely 25 or even below 25 years old. So this is millennial Sita. Sita wanted to fly to Dubai. Sita wanted to gamble in Las Vegas. Sita wanted to spend nights in Paris. Sita wanted a bungalow in Luton's Delhi. Sita was an engaged, desiring subject. When dreams and desires were deleted, Sita trailed behind the commander-in-chief. Sita cooked meals for brothers and others. Sita loved mutton biryani and murg musallam. The brothers and others loved paneer and sambar. The brothers and others munched every leaf and fruit, ate everything that grew on trees and under the ground. Sita dreamt, salivated, fantasized. Alas, the elusive mutton biryani and murg masalam behaved as incorrigibly as the coy, elusive golden deer. Sita was not in chains. Sita was not encaged. Sita was bound within. Invisible borders, barricades, and speed breakers, lines of control, more dense than lines in graph sheets. Sita was confused. The books she read were freedom songs. The life she led was rigorous imprisonment, lifelong. Millennial Sita's degrees surrendered to the decrees of others. Millennial Sita found that others, mothers, fathers, brothers, wagged their fingers from their patriarchal towers. Millennial Sita did not dive into the arms of the ravaged planet Earth. Millennial Sita zipped up the spacesuit and left for the planet Mars. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjukta. Thank you for reciting those two very, very special poems. And Smita ma'am, I think I have known Sanjukta DasGupta as the writer of Lakshmi Unbound. Similarly, I knew Smita Agarwal several years ago as the writer of one single poem called Lopamudra, which I had read in a particular anthology and which had captured my imagination. It was through that poem that I found her, tracked her. So Smita ma'am, over to you to talk very briefly about your poetry and to read a section from it. I give you 5 minutes. I know I'm doing injustice, but do we have you with us?
I think you lost her again.
Yes.
There is some issue with her internet. Yes, she is back.
Yes, Smita ma'am, over to you. Yes.
Actually, yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes,
you are heard. 5
Actually,
minutes.
it's raining. It's raining heavily, so all sorts of nonsense is happening. Anyway, since we are short of time, did you ask me to read Lopamudra, or can I read whatever I want?
Yeah, whatever. I introduced you as the author of Lopamudra.
Yeah. If we have time, then I'll read that. Otherwise, I'll take up another one. So, as I said, that Sanjukta Di has already laid the background for feminist writing in India in English from within India. So I'm not going to touch upon that because of lack of time. And these two terms of what women poets try to do in their feminist poems, these two terms, that revisionist and remythification, they become very relevant. These are a major thrust of the enterprise of feminist writing in India. So the poem that I'm going to read is from my latest book, Speak Woman. I don't know whether you can see the book. And this poem, To a Daughter on Raksha Bandhan, it upends the whole enterprise of male protection. So, and we all know that this idea of Raksha Bandhan probably emerges from the Mahabharata, because Draupadi had tied the Rakhi on Krishna's wrist and she had sought his protection during the war and things like that. So one way of looking at Raksha Bandhan through the lens of this poem, called To a Daughter on Raksha Bandhan. Let's tweak this around, this Raksha Bandhan. Recall how Kunti had to dispossess herself of a son. Sita walk into fire despite all the wrists adorned with sacred thread. This Raksha Bandhan, girl, wrap the Rakhi around your wrist and promise yourself to help yourself when, God forbid, in need. Promise yourself to help yourself when, God forbid, in need. Look after your body. Take care of your mind and heart. Tell yourself time and again that you are all you need. Be your own friend. Nurture your strengths. Teach yourself the hard way never to expect or require from anyone other than your own self. It sounds impossible. It seems extreme. Yet, when a tooth aches, when labor pains lash out, or a diseased body part rebels, you learn no one can protect you from pain. You are alone on this battlefield. Then why delude yourself? Realize and accept you alone are your best bet. Build for yourself, brick upon brick, your mansion of abundant self-sufficiency. Build for yourself, brick upon brick, your mansion of abundant self-sufficiency. This Raksha Bandhan, dear child, wrap around your own wrist this sacred thread, this Rakhi. Do I have time to read Lopamudra?
Would you read extracts from it?
Yes.
Maybe 2 more minutes.
So, so this poem that Basudhara was talking about, Lopamudra, this is again a revisionist poem. We all know that Lopamudra is was the wife of Agastya Muni, and in the Rig Veda, just as we have verses from Agastya Muni, we also have verses from Lopamudra, and there's this whole myth related to Lopamudra that you all can later look up, and it is this myth that I have revisited and reimagined. So Lopamudra, she was married to Agastya Muni, who was many years older than her, and because he was practicing austerities, he did not treat her as a wife. In other words, they would not have any sexual contact. And Lopamudra expresses her sexuality and demands that she gets her sexual rights as a wife. Come quickly, old man, come see. You who hanker for immortality, look what my burnished copper mirror shows. Both you and I will be immortal. You will be reputed as an author of hymns, and I, Lopamudra, your young wife with animal charms, will be remembered as the woman who perfected eroticism. Old man, you're always fretting, pulling long faces. If only you let me get close, I'd wrap my limbs around you, nibble your ears. You become all the more desirable when you gently, very gently try to push me away, saying, we two must always strive against each other. Really, old man? Is asceticism the only path to immortality? What about your ancestors suspended by their heels in a pit? To rescue them, you must get a son. Isn't that why you created me, fashioned me out of the most graceful parts of different animals? The exact complement to your moments of lust? Oh, damn, I tell you. You'll be immortal. In ages to come, people shall christen their sons Agastya. when languages multiply, cultures clash and unite, a novelist, the hero of his story will be Agastya. The hero's buddies will nickname him August. Now here I'm referring to the novel English August. In that age called postmodern, poetry, which you say is Vatic, will have become jingle. It'll merrily be marrying sounds like that of the proper noun August to that of your venerable name, Agastya. You bullied my father into consenting to give me away to you. I, a princess bred in voluptuousness, sent off with a hermit. It's just about tolerable, you being stingy about this and that, us sleeping on grass mats, eating roots and fruit the forest has on offer. Must you be miserly about love too? So this is where I'll end the poem. And before we go on to any other discussion or question answers, Basudhara herself is a very, very accomplished poet, and I would want to request her to tell us something about her poem Kali from her book Inhabiting. In this poem, Basudhara, you inhabit Kali, and the poem has a startling ending which has reminded me of Edward Munch's painting, The Scream, which is like an infinite scream passing through nature. That is how you imagine Kali in this poem, and I request you to go ahead and tell us something about it and to read from it.
I think we are very short of time, but in just 2 minutes, while I conclude, I'll also do this. So to talk about this, thank you.
Basudhara,
Yes.
take your time. Maybe you finish in another 7-8 minutes. Take your own time too. And then we can
very kind of you. Thank you very much.
So that you make the whole thing very well. Okay. Yeah. Take your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So I think, I will bring in all these ideas that have just been discussed. So Smita Agarwal has spoken of tradition, and here the two feminists on the panel with me are women from whom I learned so much, both in theory and in creative practice. They have taught me how to subvert, how to rewrite myths, how to question, most importantly, I think, how to interrogate ideas around us. And this particular poem, so I think the first time Inhabiting is my third collection of poems, and it is in Inhabiting for the first time that I dare to handle the idea or the subject of mythology. So it has quite a few poems that subvert myths. There's a poem on Kali, as Smita Agarwal pointed out. There's a poem on Durga. There's a poem on Radha. There's a poem on Sita. There's also a poem on a Greek goddess of fury called Lysa. So I have tried to bring in around 6 to 7 significant feminist figures in mythology whom I try to question and whom I try to reinterpret. This particular poem for Kali is a woman writing to a woman. So the beginning of the poem is like this: I am lying at your feet today, Kali, looking up at you the way Shiva must have done all these years. So that is the vantage point that I want to emphasize. Shiva lying at Kali's feet. It is another woman, who is replacing Shiva, me, or a woman speaker who is lying at Kali's feet. And when she lies at Kali's feet, the way she observes Kali, the physical, description, and how the physical animates the emotional. So it's a kind of re-looking. It's a kind of reverting the gaze instead of the lying man looking at an outraged woman. So this woman who looks at Kali knows why she's outraged. So she knows, why she has had to become Kali. And the concluding lines that that Smita ma'am mentioned, it's a long poem, so I will not read it in its entirety. The closing lines are this, or maybe the last 2 stanzas I will read. Darkness's relentless guardian, you fight its moonless scarce, largely unarmed, a lone scimitar in hand, in your blood, the vision of star-ushered peace, while on your tongue, suspended between your witnessing teeth, is an ageless battle between silence and speech. Your tale, Kali, remains untold. Your vowels bottled, your consonants on hold. Only your body is a crusading ship, determined to reach meaning's shore. Rest this vigil for a moment, Kali. Lie down in the dust with me. Allow the earth to bear the weight of your agony and dreams. Release your tongue that bleeds confined within your teeth. Unwind your sufficiency, loneliness, this riverine necessity to silt. Rest from being a warrior, Kali. Let me calm your commitment, caress you into a sleep. You must be so wary of being a scream. So this is just to give the warrior goddess a rest in another poem that is to appear in my forthcoming collection. I try to give the warrior god Ram a rest because he has been portrayed in in contemporary cultural mythology. He's forever crusading. So we need to give these figures, just as we need to make these figures speak, the silent Sita or the silent Lakshmi, we also need to give these figures a rest. So not to speak in their name. So speaking in their name and also not in their name. This is a very dangerous, there's a very thin line between these ideas of speaking for and speaking of. So I think that this particular panel has been very successful from the kind of comments that I see in the chat box. There's a lot of discussion on the Ravan poem that Smita Agarwal brought in. And this is basically a panel like this or a subject like this is not intended to give answers. It is intended to raise more questions. It is intended to encourage scholars and people every day, everywhere to think critically, to examine and re-examine ideas that we have been dealing with, that we are conditioned into, so conditioned into that we do not know how to interrogate them. So I think that this panel had a wonderful journey. We began with talking about myths. We entered into the various religious and secular versions of myths. We talked about how myths free-flowing in society take various cultural representations, even the films that we see on Netflix, OTT, they are all representations. That is a mythology of its own. And then from there, we spoke about, Sanjukta DasGupta spoke about how vernacular languages offer greater scope for gender expression and gender protest. Smita Agarwal gave us 3 wonderful examples from 3 different texts which are deeply rooted in our culture. And from there onwards, we went to discussing the personal and seeing a glimpse of the writing of these 2 poets who have been able to dismantle accepted notions of mythological figures and who have taken revisiting and rewriting mythology very seriously. And thank you very much for having us on a panel like this. Thank you very much to the audience for engaging with the discussions. Over to the organizers for the Q&A session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all the 3 speakers. And I wish that some of the other literatures, like, from Urdu, a lot of such stories from Ismat Chautai or Kulatullah and Haider, who were really so much for the women liberation, could have found some space here. But anyway, that can be raised in the question and answer session. Here, just an announcement for coming Saturday. We are having Professor Patricia Jeffrey from London, from University of Edinburgh, and 2 other speakers are Professor Betsy Hartman and Professor Amrita Basu, joining her for the topic Neither Farmer Nor Laborer and Other Challenges for the Intergenerational Contract. She is well known for working on the social contracts within South Asia, especially the Muslim side. and she is going to talk about it. So now we are going to enter into question answer session. And I'm sure the chat box is full. So many would like to raise questions. The usual moderator here, Dr. Rafat Hussain, is vacationing in Europe. So I will rather encourage Basudhara to become the moderator again for, everybody is now free. They can raise hand, digital hand, or write in the chat box. She is going to take up the question answer. Or if you are unable, just to write something or raise your hand physical, we will try to respond. Try to be very brief because as you know, the chat box is full. Everybody starts detailing their questions. Be very specific in your responses too, so that you can take up more and more questions. That's all I can say. You have 30 more minutes, or I will rather say, 30 to maximum 40 minutes. By our 1 p.m. we stop because everybody will be tired. Okay? So please, Basudhara, this is the pressure is on you.
Thank you, sir. I already see, I'm emboldened to unmute myself because I already see the first question here. So this is, the question is, as Allahabad said, that the only way to answer the question is remythification of a myth. So how long will this remythifying take time to be accepted as present truth? So I think the question is, how long will this remythification continue? And how long will it take time to accept something as true? Is it? Dhatri, that is the question. Now, here the one point that before I also invite the speakers, the other two panelists to present their opinion, I think we are questioning here the very idea of truth within inverted commas, because truth as an objective fact has largely been rejected. We keep on seeing several versions of truth. So what is truth for one may not be truth for the other, which is why we need to agree to disagree between ourselves. So one story, if we look at it in the postmodernist sense of every narrative being free-floating and freewheeling, then in that case, the very idea of truth stands discredited. So one story or one narrative that becomes popular or that becomes or that is presented as a so-called mainstream narrative, that mainstream narrative can only be challenged by another marginal narrative. So this is what is happening, the mainstream ideas are being challenged by the margins, and then challenges and counter challenges. And that is, I think, what we talk about as the dialectical discourse. That is how a discourse develops a body of ideas. And I would invite the other panelists, Smita Agarwal, Sanjukta, DasGupta, to step into the discussion if they wish. Also from the person raising the questions, Dhatri, if you would like to add something to your question.
Can we go for another question since this has already been answered?
Sure. So this is a question from Smita. She says that, do you find any significant difference between the male and female writers as reimaginators of mythological women in modern times? And I think I will leave Sanjukta DasGupta to answer this question. I repeat the question. Do you find any significant difference between male and female writers as reimaginators of mythological women in modern times?
Thank you for this very good question. And I would definitely say that in many cases, I find that men's poetry are more feminist than women's poetry, especially in the Bengali language. And in the Bengali language, as I referred to Tagore, which was a colonial poet as an example, but in terms of all the young poets and also very established poets who are writing even now, like the poet Shubodh Sharkar. the poems that they write are so strongly feminist that one would really wonder that whether as women poets, we are even sometimes able to match the sort of feminist writing that men are capable of. And as you know, sometimes it is one of those universally acknowledged facts that it is not the men, but the women are the worst misogynists. Yes. So sometimes it is this that I'm thinking in terms of intellectual responses. And here, often, we have seen Tagore was a feminist, Amartya Sen is a feminist. All these writers, male writers, have been so liberated in their approach, whereas women have been a little uncertain whether they should write or not. And this is from the 19th century onwards, that should I, shouldn't I? Is it possible for a woman to write this way? This hesitation persists even in the 21st century. And as Smita pointed out, and as I also stated, that maybe in vernacular women's literature, we find that absolutely matching male responses in terms of emerging feminist discourse. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjukta ma'am. There's a question from Rahul, but before that, Mini Nanda has raised her hand, and Mini ma'am, I would like you to unmute and ask your question. Yes.
Thank you, Basudhara. It's not a question. Can you hear me? I have a bad throat.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So this is in continuation to what both these, very excellent speakers have said. Sanjukta mentioned Tagore, and I would like to extend that to the beautiful short story by Tagore, Sri Epatra, the wife's letter. So the sensitivity there, you see, how she's lived the traditional life. She's lived in that very confined society and home. And then in Puri, how she tries to find and assert her individuality. So it's not just that the men cannot, when the question was asked about gender, it is more about your perception, your sensitivity, and your understanding to the problem. Here I would like to add another example from an English writer in English, Telugu writer in English, Lalita Kumari. P. Lalita Kumari, and we know her as Volga. I was very fortunate to meet her when she came here to Jaipur. So Volga has rewritten the Ramayana, and there's a very beautiful short story where she portrays Supnakha as a very sensitive person interacting with Sita. So you see how she's breaking down all the hierarchies, the hierarchy of the palace, the hierarchy of the king, and here in the forest, in that open space, the two women meet, Supnakha and Sita. And Volga has written a very beautiful story about that and presented her with so much of humanity. So I would like to add that it's your own individual understanding, not so much of situated as a male or a female writer. It's your understanding and your empathy and your compassion to reach out, which lends a certain richness to our myths, where they can be retold and recontextualized. Thank you, Basudhara, for giving me this chance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mini ma'am, for bringing in that wonderful story. And yes, Sanjukta ma'am has something to say on Tagore. Yes.
No, I just was thanking Mini.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mini ma'am. Dr. Hassan would like to ask a question. Dr. Iltifat Hassan, you could please unmute and ask.
Yes, I just said thank you very much. First of all, thanks a million to the three esteemed ladies for a very, very good presentation. And my sincere thanks to Razi also. So bringing up, organizing these intellectually interesting programs. I have a slightly different question for the three esteemed ladies. Why do we look at men and women differently? Intellectually, we are the same. The brain is common between females and males. Females were behind in a number of ways because men dominated them. for centuries and centuries, but now we are getting out of it. At what point do the three ladies think that we will stop talking about female writers versus male writers and talk about human writers? We, the writers, there's no difference, in my opinion, between the intellect between men and women. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very, very thought-provoking question.
So there are some liberal men like him. See that?
Yes.
So we are
Many,
not.
many.
We all are not villains, you know. So
Thank you. And I would like someone in the panel, Sanjukta or Smita ma'am, perhaps to respond to that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the person who has asked the question.
Dr. Hassan, Dr. Hassan.
Dr. Hassan has quite rightly pointed out that over the years, over the centuries, this debate of equality among men and women has evolved to quite an extent. And why do we keep on harping about it? So when we look at your question, Dr. Hassan, it is only within a certain segment and a certain class where some sort of intellectual equality may have been attained between men and women. But in the larger pockets of the world, women are very much behind in education, in socio-economic reforms, in all manner and aspects of their lives. I mean, even in India, in the villages of India, in the poor, backward pockets of India, a Dalit woman, or even if she is not Dalit, a poor woman of any caste, what individuality and what identity does she have? So, you see, there is so much of disparity. If you are talking about Basudhara, Smita and Sanjukta Di, yes, I would say, I would affirm, I would say with great confidence that not for a second do I feel undervalued or devalued, or do I in any way feel challenged by male intellectual superiority or anything like that. But even in my own household, can I say this with such confidence regarding my maid, who even now, even today, gets thrashed by her husband when he comes home drunk? So the disparity all over the world, in pockets of the world, in Africa, in Asia, there is so much of disparity in the existence of women vis-a-vis the status of men, that the feminist discourse is still very much relevant. That is what I have to say.
Thank you, Smita ma'am. And these two questions, Mini Nanda bringing in Tagore and how Tagore had looked at women with so much empathy in his times. And this particular question of men looking at women, the kind of liberal ideas reminds me, and because also Razi Saab happened to mention Chuktai, I'm reminded of Chuktai's wonderful essay on her brother, which is titled Dozaki, and it is translated as Hellbound. And she talks about the support that her brother offered her and the kind of independence, the kind of courage that he imparted to her, which was necessary for the kind of writer that she became. So men have everywhere, there have been men behind women all the time, just as much as there have been women behind men. It does not get discussed, that is mostly. All right, thank you very much. And to move ahead with the questions, there is a question from Ghanishta Verma who says, how might one delve into the allegorical dimensions when re-mythologizing myths? So I think I'll take that up. So Ghanishta, when you are re-mythologizing, it's allegorical. Myths work, myths are not realistic. What happens is there is this confusion between, or the kind of obfuscate, there's a kind of deliberately created confusion between reality and what you call fantasy between historical time or historical fact and what is a historical. So myth takes its place on the side of the ahistorical. It takes its place on the side of, a historical on the one hand, but then, it takes its side it takes its stance on the side of reality also, because these myths never leave us. There's also one place where Barth says that no matter how poor the translation of a myth, when myths are translated from one language to another, Barth says no matter how poor the translation, the essential content of the myth is not lost. Unlike, in literature, it's a poorly translated piece of literature will not be able to give you everything that the original piece had, but so much will be lost. But a myth is not lost in translation. And that is perhaps why, myths are so difficult to vanquish, because they are everywhere. They are free floating. They are around us. So the allegorical, the same ideas which go into the preparation or the establishment of a myth will also go into the establishment of an alternate myth or a re-myth. So a re-myth will be another myth. It will have all the characteristics that the original myth had. Only, it will change the process of signification. It will subvert it. Right. So instead of Sanjukta DasGupta's Lakshmi, Lakshmi works within the same parameters. Lakshmi is replaced by Lakshmi. The parameters remain the same. So, you just change these signifiers. Instead of women wanting to be Lakshmi or Lakshmi being put forward as a suitable model for women, we are positing a Lakshmi, as a model who is non-conformist. So it is the same. I hope that answers your question. Girija Sharma has raised her hand. Girija ma'am, I would please invite you to unmute and ask your question.
I must congratulate all the three speakers for this really engaging discussion. And we were very fortunate to hear some of the brilliant poems that you yourselves have written. Well, I was reminded of the way myths have been put on trial by a very significant writer of our times, Mahasweta Devi. I was reminded of her Draupadi, that story, that iconic story, Draupadi, and also The Breast Giver. And in both these stories, I believe she puts these myths on trial in a very unique way, because we are invited to contrast real women with those calendar goddesses who stay eternally young. And even though the names of goddesses are given to women, and while I was listening to your poems, I was thinking about how women are seen as Lakshmis or Kalis or whatever. And suddenly, I mean, we kind of try to impose those images of eternally young, beautiful goddesses onto those women. But the reality is different, because women in real life cannot be like a Lakshmi or a Kali, because they are not mythical after all. They are real women. So, what is your take on that? I mean, is it really possible to see these images that you create in your poems associated with these goddesses as somewhat troubling? I mean, my anxiety is that when you compare a woman with Lakshmi or Kali, it somehow makes me a little uncomfortable, because you cannot really associate real women with real goddesses or mythical goddesses.
Thank you very much for your question, Girija ma'am. And I think I will leave Sanjukta DasGupta to answer this. Sanjukta ma'am.
Yes, that's precisely what my poem said, that I can't be Lakshmi, because that is an imposition, a sort of social conditioning through centuries, that women have been entrapped within these myths and asked to follow in the footsteps of these goddesses and epic heroines. And
Exactly.
in my own poetry, and also in the poetry of many of the Bengali women poets and also writers, as very rightly you pointed out, Mahashweta Devi, have been able to not just deconstruct, but radicalize. Look at Draupadi and look at the epic Draupadi. And there, I suppose, it is not a continuation of the goddess image into the 21st century. It is a total secularization of the goddess image. And this secularization and this sort of demythification is the objective of feminist poets and writers, and they can be both male and female. Let us not get into the gender politics of who is male or who is female. You have to think in terms of prioritizing gender equality. And that can only happen post-patriarchy.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Girija ma'am, for joining us and for your question. Abdul Jabbar sir has raised his hand, and I would invite you to ask your question, please.
So wonderful. Thank you. Remarkable discussion today. As always, enjoy this forum. I'm trying to bring it back to 2024. Politics, basically. I think it's putting us into some sort of reality check. When you look at the India, the largest democracy and the oldest democracy, the US, where I have been living for the last 43 years. So I think we have a kind of important phase in this remarkable transformation of ideas about female politicians. But India did that some time ago. Indira Gandhi, even Sri Lanka had a female prime minister. So I think it's in the suffrage, women's suffrage history, if you look at it, always US has been very behind in terms of women liberation. Only 100 years ago, they have given the right for women to vote. So how do you, because you have a remarkable understanding of the psyche of the population, gender, so how do you see now Kamala Harris being the candidate for the major party in the US to be the for the presidency of this country? Also, here she has a mother from Tamil Nadu and father from some Caribbean country. So clearly there's an international kind of transformation is happening. So can you kind of provide some sort of insight into this phenomenon? Thank you very much.
Oh, so we have moved away from poetry and got into contemporary politics. And I would say, well, already United Kingdom, we had Rishi Sunak. Okay. And
I'm talking about.
But if you are talking about women, however, Hillary Clinton should have been president. Yes, of course. She should have been president. And again, that absolute masculinist Republican Party of the USA is with their, arms block, is the one which blocked Hillary from getting in. Not that I would say that Hillary wouldn't start wars, but at least Hillary should have been the first woman president. And of course, I'm looking forward to Kamala Harris, and hopefully Kamala Harris will be a little saner and think that profit can be made not out of wars, but other means.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, when we talk about women in politics, we talk a lot about how, women in politics in India, especially when we look at the panchayat level, they still continue to be under male domination. They still continue to, the decision making, the brunt of decision making, or you could say the privilege of decision making, generally belongs to the woman's husband. So we see a lot of women, in the rural villages of India, in the rural side, who are coming up in politics, but it is only, they are just token, occupiers of the position or the chair, and the real decision makers is always, the patriarchal setup which is behind them. In fact, in the tribal belt where I live, there are so many women who are penalized for raising their voices, even though they belong to the system of governance. So seeing any woman, it's a special privilege that she has, she has Indian diaspora connections. But seeing any woman, arrive at that position of decision making, whether it is in the East or the West, kind of is an empowerment for women everywhere. So any accomplishment, made by women anywhere, I think that becomes very important. Though what we want is that these should percolate down to the grassroots. Intersectionality should be applicable everywhere, irrespective of geography, irrespective of class, caste, also educational qualifications, race, educational qualifications, etc. Thank you. Thank you for bringing in that important dimension.
See, Rishi Sunak and Kamala Harris have examples of the empire striking back.
Not only writing back, but striking back.
Striking back. So that's interesting from us, looking at it, all these this Western politics from Asia. It's interesting for us how the empire is striking back.
I think I should interject a little in this. It is a
Please
lottery.
do.
It is just like by a lottery system, or just like by happens to be the situation. Rishi Sunak, nobody wanted to take that prime ministership at that moment in British history. So he was the unfortunate compromise candidate who was willing to take up this charge. And here, if Biden was not pressed too much for his old age, he was not willing to give it up. Okay, so this were two situations, unfortunate or fortunate for the Indian diaspora to pick up the thread. And as for the women prime ministers in our India, Pakistan, or Sri Lanka, the real scenario in here not having a woman president, the real scenario should be looked at how much women are uplifted or empowered. In the United States, women are everywhere now. But in India or Pakistan, women are nowhere. Although because of a dynasty politics or whatever, they are seen as prime ministers and all those, but there are no power structures. There's really nothing there. And, with some reservation quota, they're in parliament.
Benazir Bhutto was killed.
Yes, but Benazir Bhutto was Bhutto's daughter. That's why she became prime minister.
But again, I think if you look at this, that India...
They were not popular. They were not popular.
But let us wait for an immigrant. I wonder whether there will ever be a immigrant woman who will become the prime minister of India. That would be a huge challenge, I think.
A immigrant woman. Let's go back to question and answer. Maybe if I get time, I will ask something, but anyway.
Yeah, I think it's pretty late now.
If you look at
yes, and there are a couple of interesting questions that are waiting. So there's this question from someone who just calls himself or herself a scholar. So this person says that since I am from Puri, Garhwal, I have a question for Smita ma'am, who belongs to the same region. Ma'am, I have closely observed women's condition here in this region, which is underscored in literature also. But moving into this post-human age, the technology and other devices, women's condition and liberation movement is speedily going up, even as the socialist feminism of Donna Haraway supports the deep-rooted myths and their slipperiness in this present age. Kindly take the concept of cyborg as well. So how do you see this transformation?
Right. So the name of the person is scholar. So she is quite right in saying that the condition in Garhwal has changed rapidly over the years. And that is because despite some regions in Garhwal and Kumaon being very backward and, very difficult to access, somehow the state managed to give basic education to its population. So one thing that we see in Kumaon and Garhwal is that every girl and every boy will be educated till at least class 6 and 7. Whether they go beyond that, that remains a mystery, and that is dependent on many factors. But they all attain some sort of basic education. So they are literate, they can write down their name, they can do simple mathematics, and they can negotiate their way in the world to a large extent. And that is a very big uplabdhi, or a very big asset for the state of Uttarakhand. Now, with that came the digital age and the internet and the digital media. And that rapidly changed the life of young women. The manager of our property in Uttarakhand, he was talking to me in Gadhwali, and his son had recently got married. He had a new daughter-in-law. So I was asking him, so how is life in the village with you and your family and your daughter-in-law and your wife and your daughter-in-law? Do they get along? And he says, what does she do? All day she's on that mobile phone of hers. He was abusing the phone in Garhwali. All day she's on that mobile phone of hers. And do you know what she gives us to eat? When it's time, because obviously they're following the convention, they're following the tradition. So once there is a young daughter-in-law, she is responsible for cooking and cleaning and all that. Do you know what she gives us to eat? When it's lunchtime, I will tell her that give me something, it's lunchtime, this, that. She'll say, okay, here I come. And she'll break open a packet of Maggi, and she makes Maggi and she puts it in front of me. So the man was utterly shocked. He was utterly disgusted with his daughter-in-law, and he was trying to tell me how dramatically the life of these girls has changed in the villages. These girls who are still climbing trees, cutting off branches of oak trees and leaves and bringing them, those gadolas, those huge stacks of grass and leaves on their backs for the cows and the goats. They will be, while doing this work, there on that mobile phone, and you see the amount of, what do you call these? Instagram reels that these girls are making now. It is unbelievable. All of them, whether they are fetching water from the stream or whether they are cutting those branches of oak trees and bringing them back home for the cattle, they are out there making Instagram reels and, showing to us that this is what Pahadi life is. This is how I dig the soil. This is how I plant the potato. Now see, the potato plant is 5. So they have started enjoying themselves because of their mobile phones. And this has created a dramatic change in their lives. And it has, I agree with the scholar, that it has brought about a revolutionary liberation in the lives of these young women who are living in the close and difficult confines of Pahadi life. So yes, the internet, the digital media, everything has brought in a welcome for the young people, maybe not so welcome for the traditional society, but a welcome change for the young people. It has brought liberation in their lives.
Thank you, Smita ma'am. I hope it clarifies the questioner, because in general, even textbooks that are taking up the idea of fourth wave feminism are talking about the centrality of virtual spaces and virtual communities to the ideas and agendas of fourth wave feminism. So I think that would also be an interesting area of research. There's a question from...
Excuse me, can I come in for a minute?
Yes,
but,
please.
I just want to make this comment that probably in the virtual platform, these poor women are able to share videos and probably feel liberated because they can use the device. And of course, it's all for the profit of Reliance. But when we are thinking in real terms, the life of these women haven't changed. After 75 years of independence, they're still carrying those bundles of sticks when they should be carrying laptops. Where is the development?
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Always trust Sanjukta DasGupta to give you very important reminders.
The development isn't
She has...
making highways from Joshimath to Badrinath and Kedarnath, and in the process of making that highways, blasting the mountains, damaging the ecology, and every single day you are seeing in the news how many landslides, how many cloudbursts, whatnot.
And these changes,
who are affected? The poor.
Changes.
And who are affected is always the poor, marginalized, tribal, and extremely below poverty line people of India. And that is 70%. And that is 70% of the population. Here, men and women, let us not even discriminate.
But eco-feminist studies also point out how women are the more disadvantaged.
Yeah, of course.
Because
women are absolutely, even then in that category, women are also the worst sufferers.
For example, if I am driving from, say, Jamshedpur, which is in Jharkhand, towards Bengal, then at any point of time, the only people, or mostly the people who are standing for long queues with water containers in their hands in front of public tube wells, mostly these are women, because men will have their, employments to attend to. And it is to women, that rationing water and also fetching water, fetching firewood, setting up a fire and cooking and keeping the family going, keeping the hearth blazing. Because of the destruction of nature, the forages have almost stopped. You don't get any material out of foraging. So the the affected community has to be seen in terms of gender. It is women who are affected more perhaps than men. We have a question from Nazir Ahmed, quite an interesting question, I feel. He asks, should we not drop the term vernacular from the discourse? Because regional languages such as Bengali, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Marathi, Kannada are just as rich as Hindi, which is another regional language of South Asia. So I think this is a very interesting question. And I would say...
Perfectly relevant question, because the term vernacular is very colonial, and since long we have made it, even the Sahitya Academy and all that, we don't say vernacular anymore, we say regional languages. So that is the term that we should stick to. And that brings into its purview all the languages and all the dialects of India, all of which have a rich literary tradition and a rich cultural tradition.
Yes,
so vernacular is a very colonial term.
Bhasha, literature.
But it has been revived of late. Smita, vernacular has been revived of late so that regional writers do not feel marginalized. It is to prioritize the Bhasha languages. Yes? Therefore, it is in contention with the global language. And the dominating global language is English. So the vernacular is really the bhashas which are contesting the globalization by bringing in localization.
And also there are, prevalent theories where we are also referring to English in the Indian context as a bhasha. So English has as much, Indian English is a product of vernacularization. So the Indian version of English that we are using.
Yeah, there was a time, I know, till the end, till 1991, I think, before globalization, vernacular was a shunned word. And then again, it re-emerged. And that is what we find even in G.N. Devi's discourse.
So English is as much in the Indian context, it is as much a vernacular language, and it has been influenced by its, so there are so many inflections of English, all because of the various regions from which English is coming. So someone from Jharkhand speaking English will be very different from someone from Delhi speaking English, from someone from the South speaking in English. So we have so many varieties of Englishes within the Indian subcontinent also. So that remains an interesting debate. Thank you for the question. Qureshi sir has raised his hand. M. Rajaullah Qureshi, I would invite you to unmute, please, and ask your question.
Rajaullah sir, please ask your question.
Unmute.
Unmute yourself. Yes.
It's not open.
Rajaullah sir, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Basudhara, if it is lunchtime for the US, it's past dinner time for us.
We will soon be wrapping up.
Thank you so much, Sanjukta.
But আমার খিদে পেয়েছে मैं भूखी हूँ.
Oh, so you all are now tired
Hello?
and hungry.
Hello?
Yes.
I'm
We
sorry,
can't
I had a
survive.
hard time. I had a hard time.
Can't survive
unmuting.
on virtual food.
Yes, please. Yes, Qureshi sir, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, I'll make it short. I'll read it from, I think if I can get there. My question, where is it? Okay. Actually, it's not from an intellectual or a scholar. It's from a common man. This question is from a common man. Are men and women equal or equitable? If it is the former, as some contend, then how do we reconcile with the two being intrinsically unequal in some ways? For example, physically, biologically, emotionally, psychologically, and in the sole role of childbearing capability. Humanity will not survive. So anyway, that's the question a common man asks. So I would like the speakers to throw some light on it. Thank you.
So, Smita, would you like to go for it?
Well, I would just say this, that because of the immense scientific advancements that have happened in the 20th century and the 21st century, this whole this whole issue of childbirth being the sole domain of women has actually, now gone into the background. I mean, people who have the wherewithal, who have the money, and who can access medical technology are having children without getting married, without having a traditional husband-wife relationship. Karan Johar, he has children. He has children through surrogacy, or he has children through whatever. So, I mean, there are so many examples. So, in the present context and the way that medical science has progressed, making human beings almost immortal, the question of the women being the sole bearers of children and women being elevated to some kind of a high platform because only they can produce children, all that has now gone down the drain. If a person wants to have a child as a single person, as a married couple, as this or that, or even if you're of the same sex and you want to have children, there are so many other ways and means of doing this. So I think that debate is over.
It's no longer relevant.
No longer relevant.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And here there's an interesting comment from Shauna Singh Baldwin in response perhaps to the first observation where someone asked why women writers and why not human writers. And she says that asking why not classify women writers as just human writers is like flying a flag saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter. So that's quite interesting. Shauna,
That's a very good comment.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very
All
much.
right.
Thank you very much.
So it's all over, Basudha, or we have more to say?
I think I will just have a look
I think
quickly-
let's give a rest to all these your colleagues. How
All right.
much? What is time in India now?
It's
10:35.
10:40. So
And
it's
from
10:40.
and you-
speakers will become speechless.
you have not taken dinner, I think. Yeah. It
I'm
looks
longing
like
for
you have
it.
not taken.
I'm longing
So
for it.
yeah, I'm sure, and we here are also a little hungry for lunch. So
Yeah.
आज
I think
lunch
so
में क्या है?
लंच में कुछ नहीं, हम लोग यहाँ पे आउट ऑफ टाउन है, तो जो भी
अच्छा।
मार्केट से मिल जा रहा है वो मिल गया तो ठीक है, नहीं मिला तो भूखे सो जाएंगे, कोई बात नहीं।
हाँ
तो
हाँ,
घर में
एक हैमबर्गर खा लीजिए।
जी घर में जो कुछ नहीं है, बस बाहर का खरीदा हुआ। सो थैंक यू ऑल, इट वाज रियली वंडरफुल सेशन एंड
Thank you for having us.
yeah, and today it was totally and entirely dedicated to the cause, as you say, and I hope that we have more sessions like this, and we should be having all these more sessions, and probably everybody learn something. Wonderful poems, and I wish a little bit more closing the gap takes place, and slowly it is some parts of the world, not everywhere, and hopefully we will do it. And thank you all. And now go to your respective corners and eat or
Meals.
sleep or whatever.
Thank you.
And thank you all.
Thank you
Bye.
very much,
So
everyone.
much.
Thank you, Razi.
Thank you.
Razi
I
Saab.
think the
Thank
chat box also befittingly ends with a comment from Rupam Chakravarti, who says that the concept of androgyny will be helpful in this regard. I think that is a befitting
yes.
closure
Okay,
Yes.
sure.
where we talk about androgyny, where we accept androgyny, and both these feminists that we have spoken on the subject. Thank you so
So
much.
so the YouTube will be available after probably 7 to 10 days. Okay. It will be in public discourse, so you can access it, or I will send you the link. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so
Take
much,
care.
Razi Saab.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye bye,
Bye.
Sanjukta ji.
Bye.
Bye bye,
Bye.
Basudhara. Bye bye. Good
Bye.
night.
Bye, Smita. Bye, Basudhara. Bye,
Bye
Razi Saab.
bye. Wonderful
Thank you.
Lovely
seeing
meeting
Bye.
all of you.
Bye bye.
Bye.